Good morning, everybody. I want to invite those of you in the hall to find a seat. And I'm just going to invite Annette Sullivan. Could you just sing a song outside and invite people to come in from the courtyard? I sing a song for the saints of God normally works. That's a good one. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're going to run through our presentation efficiently, but to such a way that you can follow what we're talking about. I do want to commend to you, and with time for questions, I should say, I do want to commend this report for you. If you didn't get to take one last time, please do take one with you, and you may want to refer to it today. We're going to refer to certain pages of it. Last week, in case you were not here, and in case you're online and only watching this particular video, we received this report, and there's a lot in there and a series of recommendations for the vitality of this church. And we believe that there's a vital future for All Saints as a parish and as a city block. You also heard from the 4 core ministry leaders, and I want to just raise up one of those pieces of conversation, which is very important for us for the penny to drop and to sink in, is that you heard Christine Love, the executive director of Covenant Community, share that for the last year they've been working with their own real estate committee to seek another campus for their residential work. And just to share a little bit there to repeat what you heard last time, Covenant Community is a fairly small residential program, room for about a dozen men, typically fewer than those, and they could double their residential population almost overnight because of the staffing they already have. And so finding a place that's more conducive to the recovery work that they do intensively with the men. They've been looking at locations where there's more land available and so on and so forth. But the other side of it you may be less aware of, Covenant Community has a significant non-residential program or daytime programming called the Recovery Resources Atlanta Midtown, or RAM for short, that helps thousands of people through the year. And there's a series of programs. It's the only program of its sort, a recovery community organization program in Midtown. So it's very important for Covenant to stay on the block with those daytime programs. We need to find out what their secret is, because they've got money from the federal government. I don't know how they did it. There is a mystery greater than the incarnation, but they've managed to do it. And they would lose some of that funding if they moved to another area of town that already had an existing program of that sort. Also, what is core and key and sort of common to each of these ministries is the MARTA station. You and I may not get to church via MARTA. Most of us, some of us may. But the people that use these resources, these 4 core ministries, rely on MARTA, and it's a key point when they're wishing to raise money to support their ministries that we have a transit station across the street. So just wanted to share those pieces. So we're going to take a look at this brochure. So we're not quite good cop, bad cop, but I'm here with Nancy Dodson. You can decide who the good cop is and the bad cop is. But this is where we're going to take a look under the hood. And it's the chapter of this report that we did not cover last time in any detail, but I do want to just invite you to turn to page 15 of the report. And we did some modeling. Typically, I should say, All Saints has wonderful financial management, very capable staff, the team that Nancy leads, very experienced here. Nancy, you've been here a little while, 18 years? 20 years on November 1st. Woo, that's amazing. That's fantastic. And an incredibly talented finance committees, budget subcommittee, endowment committee, stewardship group. David Aldred is here, the chair of the finance committee. It is a deeply talented bench, as you'd expect perhaps at All Saints, but they give. If they started charging us by the hour, I think we'd have to have a major fundraiser here. But incredible work. To say clearly, we take care of our financial life very carefully, but we don't typically do a 30-year forecast. This is an attempt to, as we're thinking about the long-term future, to do that. So let me just share some trends, then I'm going to hand over to Nancy. We look at, there are giving levels that you can see across the Episcopal Church. That's easy to see because of something called the parochial report. So those figures are offered to the national church. nationally, giving increased about 8% over a 10-year period, 2011 to 2022, about 8%. The Diocese of Atlanta giving rose about 10%. Now look at this. This is where you should pat yourselves on the back. Giving at All Saints during the same period of time rose 21%. So essentially, All Saints we should give ourselves a round of applause. It's an incredibly generous parish. It brought me great delight to discover how generous we are per person here. One of the most generous churches in the Episcopal Church, in the top 10 churches of generosity in terms of how each person gives. So that's a success story. The other success story is newcomers and pledging. Since 2019, we've had about 768 individuals arrive as newcomers. Now, just think about one factor in that. If they're a young adult, you probably know this from your own life. How long does a young adult, it sounds like a beginning of a joke, but how long does a young adult stay in any given place for a period of time? 18 months, 12 months. There's this continuous sort of movement through. But nearly 800 people joining the church since then is an incredibly successful number. We invest a lot of our staff time and effort into that. And what you see in these figures, I'm not going to go through them in detail, but you'll see the giving patterns are very similar. If you broke down giving $10,000 and up a year, $5,000 and up, $2,500 to $5,000, just those brackets as an example, less than $2,500. You see very similar giving patterns proportionally as you do in established members, which is good news. And it's important to know that it isn't that all the newcomers are giving $10 a year and we're really stuck. Similar patterns. So that's good. Second bit of good news is that the average age of those givers by category is about 10 years younger. Also good news. But here's the bit of reality we need to just sort of begin to look under the hood and see what's coming. I'm trying to find a really kind way to say this, but some of us will be going, all of us are going on to glory. Some of us will get there sooner than others. When that happens, and we look at this, other parts of this report show how All Saints is a much younger church than a denomination. Yet, the reality remains, if you look at the giving of those who are of a certain age and up, you simply are not able to replace that giving by newcomers alone or by the incredible generosity of this parish. What essentially that means is that our expenses outpace our income. Next year, it is our firm intent, and we're on our way to balancing a budget. But we're not thinking only about next year, we're thinking about the next decade and the decade after that. Where would we be if nothing changes? And this is, if you're thinking about any framework for today, and I'll hand over to Nancy here, is the one option is to change nothing about All Saints. Nothing about our financial model, nothing about the block, and just sort of carry on. And today, we had having 6 children baptized this morning. It's like, what else can we fit in this one service? It's all happening. But where will we be 20 years from now? I think, how can I prepare the way for my successor and that person's successor? How can today's vestry prepare the way for their successors? It's a church that is serious about good stewardship, that thinks about the long-term future. So here we are. So I'm not sure if I was the good cop, but I was sort of medium cop. Nancy Dodson. I'll give you this microphone.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, All Saints. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nancy Dodson. I'm the Finance and Operations Director here at All Saints. I have been here for 20 years, and I've seen a lot going on here. I tell you, I am often overwhelmed by how generous this parish is. Not just in the giving of money, but in the giving of your time and your care to this place. And it's so obvious how much you all love this place. Now, as the finance director, I get to work very closely with the finance committee, and a better group of financial professionals you will not find anywhere. I can tell you that right now. They're headed up by David Aldridge and our treasurer, Sheldon Taylor, who's not here today. And they are absolutely dedicated to the fiscal well-being of this place. And I can tell you right now, we are in good, stable financial position. So, congratulations to all of you for that, because that's because of your generosity. As the operations director, I get to work with the B&G committee, and that is a really fantastic group of professionals that they work tirelessly to handle all of the maintenance issues of this parish. And they are headed up by Danny Johnson, who you'll hear from here in just a minute. And the facility staff headed up by Jeff Couch. There's Jeff right there. Okay, so I never get the opportunity to talk to all of you. And you're probably all wondering what I'm doing up here. Well, I'm here to give you the bad news. I'm going to give you some good news, so stay tuned to the end. But so as part of the work for the Future Church Task Force, Sheldon Taylor put together a really detailed analysis, and Simon was just talking about it, of basically the next 30 years of projections. And his projections are based on if everything stays the same here, if we make no changes at all. And then he took pledge and membership trends and very conservative escalators and applied all of that to our historic financial numbers. And no surprise, our expenses will outpace our income. In 5 years, All Saints will be operating at a $360,000 deficit. In 10 years, we will be operating at a $625,000 deficit. This is if we do nothing. So I want you to really hear that, because obviously this isn't sustainable. And the legacy of All Saints demands that we do something now to ensure that this place is here for future generations to enjoy. So I promised you some good news. So here it comes. We have opportunity. Look around you. This place is just such a fantastic asset. And the church task force, along with our architects, has identified many different income producing possibilities that Simon's going to tell you more about as this process continues. If you start looking around with different eyes and realize that we have to change, we have to pivot, embrace that change, adjust our expectations, we can change that bleak-looking financial future. Also, consider endowing your pledge. You know, our pledge distribution consider endowing your pledge. Our endowment distribution income right now, 88% of it goes directly into our operating budget, and it supports the operations of this parish. That's going to be essential in the years to come, and it needs to be increased in years to come. So what could you do today? Get your 2025 pledge in. Yep, I knew Ellen would like that. We are currently working on the 2025 budget. Decisions are being made right now. A good income estimate is imperative to good budgeting. Our good programs, our worship opportunities, the maintenance of our buildings and grounds, caring for our dedicated staff, all of that goes into that budget number. And it's so important that we're able to budget in a way that provides for all of those things. It's an ever important document. So let me close by saying this. We have the opportunity to create solutions right now to ensure the future of All Saints. And Lee Robinson, one of my favorite finance committee members, likes to say, hope is not a strategy. I couldn't agree more, Lee. Let's get to work.
Well done, Nancy. What a great speaker. Such an inspiring speaker we have as our CFO. That's amazing. Thank you. Good job. Hi, everybody. I'm Danny Johnson. I serve as the Buildings and Grounds Committee Chair. Been on the committee since maybe 2016 and been chair for like the last year or so, and it's been quite a new experience getting to see more underneath the hood, more working with Simon and Nancy and Jeff. And I'm amazed at how much has been accomplished by the professionals here on this campus. B&G, we have a mission to be good stewards of our block. Being a good steward means responsibly and faithfully managing the resources that are entrusted to us. We have a committee of 10 folks that have a diverse skill set, from architects to lawyers to just good public administrators. And we're doing a monthly assessment with the group here of Zach and Jeff and Nancy to see what is the priority every month, because sometimes it changes, and we have to manage these resources that we have accordingly, because they're not unlimited. We do have a budget we have to work with. And some of the big work that you've seen around in this last decade was funded by the 2012 capital campaign, where we accomplished a lot of work. The attic upstairs in Parish House, the courtyard renovations, the Eggleston Hale window, and so many other projects were funded by a large capital campaign that happened over a decade ago. Most churches do a capital campaign every 5 to 10 years, so we're beyond that for a couple of reasons. COVID was one, but also future of the block. We were trying to figure out where we're headed. So we've done a lot of great work. We strategically assess the budget and have to always make decisions that are hard. We have a long list of things we'd like to do. We have the shorter list of things that we can afford. And so we work with making those priorities and getting the funding prescribed to those projects that are needed. Today, we're talking about option one of a presentation that was presented to the vestry last month at their retreat. And we're going to go through a few slides. And we have a slide for every building on the campus to kind of show you what's been invested in the last 10 years and what we see as a maintenance and repair to keep these buildings in good condition if they were to all stay on this block. What investment would All Saints have to put in to keep them going so they can serve the purpose of the church and our ministries? So Zach, would you please hit the next slide? Okay, so our first is church and chapel. This is absolutely our priority when it comes to all of our future financing. We must maintain the church and chapel in a state of good repair. It's where our priority should always lie. We've done a lot of work over the last 10 years. Each of these slides, you can see the maintenance investment since 2013, $2.5 million. Estimate of maintenance needs through 2034. Each of these is going to show you the next 10 years of needs to kind of show you that scale and the projects that are included in there. And in essence of time, we want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. So we're just kind of going to go through this and look at the main large numbers here for the next 10 years and the project list. I'm not going to read them all out to you, but we're going to go to the next slide. So Eggleston, this is one of our largest ticket items. As you can see, we've put a little bit of investment into it in the last 10 years, but moving forward, to bring Eggleston into a state of good repair, it's one of our largest ticket items. And there's a number of structural items that you can see from the naked eye if you walk around the building that have a plan in place on how we will address those. And we've got really good construction estimates to give us that number there of $6.8 million to bring it into a state of good repair for the long term. Next slide. is the parish house. Now, this is one of our pride and joys. This building was built in the 50s and gives us the least trouble, right, Nancy? I mean, we've put some money into it back in the capital campaign to give you what you see now. If y'all remember what it looked like before, we've brought this thing up to a new age, and it looks great. It's functioning great. It gives us very little problems, almost no leaks since I've been on B&G, knock on wood. And there's some continuing maintenance that it's going to need to stay in this state of repair for the future. So you can see those numbers there. Next slide. Pritchett. Everybody loves Pritchett. It demands more time than anything of our committee's time. Primarily, we have a really bad roof. The roof was not constructed in a thoughtful manner for the long-term maintenance of that building. It has gutters that are internal to the walls of the building. And when you collect water inside of the walls and hopefully get it out, it has a tendency to overwhelm the system. And we have had, since it was built, I think we've been chasing leaks in the roof. It's been a maintenance nightmare for a very long time. But I will say that Jeff and Zach have got this building tightened up with some contracting work, good contracting work this year, but we have a lot of work to do to make sure that it can last another generation. And part of that large $4 million future cost is a restructured roof to get the internal gutters placed on the outside of the building. That will help the water be maintained off of the building and get it off the site and out of our classrooms. Next slide. The outreach buildings, so this includes Tate Hall, Mac, and the other storefront buildings we purchased a few years back. They weren't built for ministry. They weren't built for much of what you would imagine this future city looking like. Those buildings have been there for, I don't know, do we have a year on when those buildings were built? It's got to be 60 plus years. Yeah. They're pretty old. So we purchased them and we've repurposed them, and we are doing some good things with them, but they need a lot of work to be maintained in good working repair so that they can potentially be rented out and provide a good service for our community for the years to come. Next slide. Our campus. We've done some great work out here in the courtyard and the new playground and for what folks can see and coordinate with on a daily basis. But there's a lot of work that happens on the whole block now that we own the entire block. And the estimates from the architects estimate about $400,000 of work we'll need over the next 10 years, just to kind of keep it in a good state and bring it up to an improved condition. We've got some work that needs to happen in this area you see there where the dumpsters are, and some of the access that we have back there needs to be improved. But yeah, it's just another part of our full block that we have to address. Next slide. Okay, the summary slide. All of that totals up to about $14 million, give or take. This is a first estimate when you think about just how much this parish will have to invest to maintain what we have here on site, as is, and allow it to be here for the next generation of All Saints parishioners. It's a large number. It is not a number that we can finance with our annual pledge-based funding strategy that we have right now. Talked about the last capital campaign happening in 2012. It's been a long time. This would be impossible for us to reach if we were not to do a capital campaign. So this is a preliminary number. It's high level. There probably could be a little tightening on it, but generally this is the kind of scale that we're looking at if the option one is chosen to keep these buildings as they are and bring them up into a state of good repair for our future. Trying to see if I have any last remaining thoughts here. Yeah, we just have to always think about our priorities, and we as a B&G committee, we have to prioritize the church and the chapel for our worship services and the needs of our site. But we do have a long list across the whole campus. All right, I'll stop there to leave us some time for Q&A. And I guess Nancy and Simon, y'all come up and
So yes, well, I wonder if I can ask, is Annette here to... She is not here. I wonder if somebody could help with the microphone as we move this around. Thanks, Jenny. Time for questions. We've got about 10 minutes for questions, so I'm going to give this mic away. Thanks, Jenny.
Just raise your hand.
I was wondering whether something is included to make Eggleston handicapped accessible.
That is absolutely part of that full assessment. Eggleston, it was built in, well, it's the original building from 1918. So it is one of those buildings that is not fully ADA compliant with the American Disabilities Act. So it is a condition. If we were to make any major modifications, we need to bring it up to ADA compliance. So.
The damage that was caused when Norfolk Southern was built, are those repairs included in the maintenance we've done already or in future maintenance?
So the proposed fixes to some of these buildings are included in these estimates. Nothing has been done to date to address that yet, but yeah.
Did I see a hand on this side of the room earlier?
Are we going to get money from Norfolk Southern that would pay for part of this $14 million?
There is a fund that has been created from that will help us address our issues. I don't know if I can expand more than that, but that has been addressed. Wow. Guess we did a good job, Simon.
Here's one more.
But we've got a few more, but we're gonna...
For someone who's new, I don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about Norfolk Southern.
So we're surrounded by construction, including that way, across the street. And that construction, has consequences around the area. And the focus that this particular presentation might draw us to is the Eggleston building. Now, just take a little disclaimer here. Here's a theologian telling you about architecture. It's not a good situation. But as I understand it from the architect, if we do nothing to Eggleston and leave it as it is, eventually it will essentially fall over. It cannot be not addressed. And that is partly to do with a radical change in the water table that was then recharged. And you'll see around the campus a series of, there probably is a fancier term for them, but I call them crackometers, but they measure cracks. I guess that's really what they are. The question in front of us is a stewardship question. Is it good just taking Eggleston building alone, and then of course the whole campus, but it's a similar question. Is it the best stewardship for the long term of All Saints to renovate the building as is, Eggleston for example, and restore it to its previous or its current purpose, so renovate it so it can continue in its current purpose? Or is it better stewardship, and that includes from a building perspective, what will an architect, what will a construction company tell you you'll get for your dollars to in some way rebuild, redesign that building? And one of the elements of that you'll hear about next week is rebuilding the building as a completely new building, or rebuilding the building and retaining the facade, which is the building is two parts. There's a rectangle and a horseshoe. Again, I'm a theologian. But the rectangle part is where you'd find my office. It's what you'd see on West Peachtree. Behind it, and you'd see it the same stone as the church building, same quarry as the church building. And then behind it, they didn't have, I guess they ran out of money for the quarry stone. They started using brick. And you see the horseshoe, as my predecessor, Reverend Meminger, was a thespian and wanted to have a theater for his Shakespearean productions, and wonderful part of our history. So there may be an option to retain a facade and rebuild the part behind. So to that question, it's a consequence of building work happening around us. Stunned you into silence. Sarah, just so folks can hear you online, they won't hear without that mic. There you go.
So I'm Sarah Hill. So is the bottom line today that we need a capital campaign, and is there another bottom line that we haven't heard about yet?
I love that question. So, what you see on the screen, it's a great question, sir, because it's clarifying. What you see on the screen, you see Master Plan Concept 1. And the vestry amazingly went through, I don't know how many concepts they went through, but they were all more or less conscious at the end of that retreat, having looked at a number of different concepts. If you recall, at the beginning of this process, what was that, the 1980s? Beginning of this process, when we started thinking about the block, we said one of the options is to do nothing. But of course, at All Saints, do nothing doesn't mean just like, well, you know what, who cares if the church is leaking on the altar, we'll be fine. You know, do nothing at All Saints is investing in our property. So behind us here is the sort of really change nothing is the first option that we've always had on the table. This is the change nothing option spread out over the next 10 years. If you did everything, noting that we typically don't do everything. We typically have to prioritize. We can do this, and then we can do this. But then every once in a while you have a capital campaign, and one of the functions of a capital campaign can be to let's repair all the work we couldn't do on a year-by-year basis and do a sort of catch-all. That's the bottom line for that concept. And the reason why we wanted to show you that today, coupled with the financial picture, is that approach best stewardship? Is the best stewardship to restore the buildings and then find another way other than, because that will not, just to note very clearly, even if we put, there's nothing we really can do, we have found, perhaps there are things, but we have not been successful in finding a commercial tenant for the Spring Street properties or the North Avenue properties. And of course, a lot of that's been driven by COVID and the change of relationship to office spaces and all the above. That's not been a driver of income. So really what you're looking at is the same sources of income over the next, well, that's 10 years, could it be 20 years? So that's the first piece on the table for you to consider. Next week, you'll have some other concepts to consider. And the purpose of next week, you'll be joined by Hank Hauser, the architect who's working with Hauser Walker, who's been working with us for now a good period of time. He'll raise up these other concepts for the block. If this is change nothing, what you'll see next week is change something. And it's really, in many ways, trying to ask you then to reflect back to the committee and the vestry, how much change do you wish to embrace here? What would you be willing to do? And some of these concepts may not come into fruition either ever or in the future. It's most likely we'll have a phased approach to the master plan. But this is all driving us towards the spring when we hope to then present the master plan. That's our intention, present a master plan to this parish that has been received and approved by the vestry. So come next week. It's a shameless advertisement to come to church next week where you can really sit and ponder. I suppose I'll offer you this thought. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was one part of your life that didn't change? I mean, it'd be wonderful. If only I could freeze the age of my children, they'd all stayed to be 7 years old. It'd be fantastic. Not going to happen. As my wife reminds me, you don't look any younger. This is the reality. So church may not be one of those places where it won't just all stay the same. But I believe there is a course for us to plot where the things that we cherish about All Saints will remain the same. And to Nancy's point, for those who in the future will call this place their church home and their spiritual home, there's a course we can plot for them. This really is down to you and the vestry. How much change is the right change for All Saints, and what sort of change is the right change? And that's the sort of big question. So I'll leave it there. Please feel free to bother Nancy particularly, and after that bother Danny Johnson with any questions you have about this. Should you find this is intended to be read, and when you're not in the room, anything about it that interests you or piques you, have a question about it, please do ask us. But we'll see you this time next week. Thank you very much.